the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Space Force. Yes, we're going to have a Space Force. Aren't you excited? I mean, it kind of makes me think back when I was a little kid. I used to watch Lost in Space on TV and go, wow, wouldn't it be great to be able to talk on the phone and see people? Wouldn't it be great to be able to have cars that drive themselves? Wouldn't it be great to have all this technology that they were saying was going to happen into the future? Hey, a flying Space Force. We're going to have one. Evidently today, we're going to establish a Space Force. It will be an all brand spanking new branch of the military. So you've got, I think the last one was the Air Force, 1947. We broke the champagne bottle on that. Now we're going to have a Space Force. And according to Trump, we're going to have a Space Force. And we're going to have an Air Force and a Space Force. It's going to be separate but equal. Yes, he actually did say separate but equal. And there's really no punchline there other than, are you kidding me? It's one of those things where you just kind of, how absurd this whole thing is. With all of the stuff going on, we're going to, kind of reminds me going back to the 80s with Ronald Reagan and Star Wars. And, and I understood the Star Wars thing. I understood the idea that we're going to pursue this big missile shield, and we're going to be technologically we're going to be way ahead. But ultimately, what our goal was to bankrupt the Soviet Union, which we did successfully, while putting ourselves in a pretty interesting financial pickle as well. I don't see the goal here. I don't see the end game. If anything, the only person we're going to bankrupt is, well, us. So I'm curious, thoughts on the Space Force? Would you sign up? You want to be Ranger Rick, or you want to be one of the Flash Gordon, or who's the one Buck Rogers? That's it. Who wants to be Buck Rogers? Oh, today. Anyway, the big news all weekend and today obviously is what is going on our southern borders. And there's part of me that goes, can we finally put to rest that the Republican Party is the party of family values? Can we finally just end that charade? Can we finally just put that aside? I mean, because it's glaringly apparent that these are people who don't care about our children, let alone their children or the others. Once they're born, you're on your own. And there's part of me that actually believes the only reason that they're against abortion in the first place is that, well, they don't get to watch those poor kids suffer through a lifetime of poverty and a lifetime of crummy jobs and a lifetime of being herded like cattle. kind of misery porn, if you will, for the right-wing fetishist. And, you know, I'm looking at this, and, you know, I know there's people who are all outraged, and I am too. But I'm not surprised that the Republicans are doing this. There's no surprise whatsoever in this for me. In that, look, they don't seem to give a rat's behind or a tinker's damn about our kids being slaughtered in schools. Still haven't seen anything on the gun issue. They certainly don't care about hungry kids because they keep talking about let's cut SNAP benefits, let's cut food programs, let's cut school lunch programs. They don't care about those kids. They certainly don't care about sick kids because they're still trying to hold CHIP as a hostage tool. So we're going to have hungry kids without insurance, and they want to cut housing assistance. So we want more homeless kids. And those are our kids, quote unquote, our kids. Here, citizens of the United States. So if that's what they're doing to our kids, if that's what they're doing to citizens in this country, do you really honestly and truthfully think that they care about someone from Guatemala, someone from Honduras, someone from Mexico? Do you really think they care about them? And the interesting thing is, you know, they're saying now there's, you know, a couple thousand kids who are being held, and some of them in tents. And, you know, the Washington Examiner has said, you know, by August, there could be as many as 30,000 kids being held in these camps. 30,000. And it got me to thinking, going, you know, what are we doing to these kids? You know, I was reading a Washington Post article earlier, and it said that the quote unquote prison guards, or who, you know, the detention camp, you know, the internment camp guards, aren't supposed to console or try and calm down the kids who are crying, or do anything to comfort them in any way, shape, or form. They're prisoners. And you go, these are kids, man. And it got me to thinking that, you know, we're creating the next group of terrorists. Where in 10 or 15 years, some idiot on TV is going to go, you know, why did they hate us so much? Oh, I don't know. Maybe when they were a baby, you ripped them away from their mother's arm, stuffed them in a tent somewhere like a dog, and, you know, treated them horribly, which gave them a lifetime of I'll tell you, you did that to me today. I'd be angry. I can't imagine what you're doing to a child. And the thing that gets me is I haven't seen really any Republicans come out and condemn what is being done. In fact, all of the polling shows this is what Republicans want. This is who they are. This is their ideology. And it is. So, again, no surprise here. It is what it is. And at the end of it, I keep coming back to, okay, well, the outraged. You're outraged about it. What are you going to do about it? Because the polling shows there are more people who are outraged than are not. So come November, is this an issue that you go, this is important? Because the administration, they're circling the wagons. You got Stephen Miller, who said it was a simple decision by the administration to have a zero tolerance policy for illegal entry, period. Now remember, Donald Trump has been saying all along that this is Obama's policy. And all I've been hearing for the last week is but Obama. The motorboating of Obama. You go, what? This is a new, did you read the April 6th edict from the little leprechaun? Did you read Sessions' letter? Did you read his call for zero tolerance and absolute crackdown? That's what this is about. Obama, even John Kelly, who you would think, you know, even John Kelly, and this is, you know, one of my great disappointments. You know, this is a guy who, you know, I've got military friends who, you know, are, hey, this is going to be the guy who keeps the ship at least somewhat righted. Even Kelly said on the family separation that it could be a tough deterrent. It would be a tough deterrent. A much faster turnaround on asylum seekers, he said. And then you got this idiot who's the head of Homeland Security, this Christian Nelson, who basically said, I'm not apologizing for it. It's the law. It's what we're doing. We're not apologizing for it. We don't apologize here. And this is the difference between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats apologize for everything. Republicans never. And then you had the little leprechaun. You had Jeffy out there making the biblical argument that governments are ordained by God and governments can do no wrong. And I just sit here and I in quite amazement in that, you know, it's the very people who tell us that they're the family of, they're the party of Christian values and family values. They're the ones who are doing this. Now understand, now this comes from Fox News. Fox News' research department said that at the end of May, the number of pending cases for the U.S. immigration courts had reached an all-time high of 714,000 cases. 714,067 cases. During Trump's term, we have seen an increase of over 172,000 cases to the backlog. And that's because they're just not doing anything. And I've heard these stories that they're deliberately gumming up the system so that they can do whatever they want to do. And the thing is if you're truly coming here seeking asylum, which we've signed international treaties that say, and we've got laws that say, come here if you're being persecuted. According, again, to Fox News' research, family units coming to this country seeking asylums. Credible fear, asylum cases. Fear of persecution or harm if they return to their home country. El Salvador, 32,455. Honduras, over 19,000. Guatemala, over almost 15,000. Mexico, over almost 7,500. India, 3,200. And you look at the apprehensions. Who are we apprehending? Guatemalans, almost 30,000 so far in 2018. Hondurans, over 20,000. El Salvadorians, over 7,000. Mexicans, only 1,500. So all of the frames that they keep throwing at us, you know, Fox News is even getting right, saying that it's people seeking asylum. These are not people who are jumping the border, who are, you know, looking, oh, we can just get over there. No, these are people who are running for their lives. And again, you think about the reputation of the shining city on the hill. The one that we're the one telling everyone, be like us. And what are we doing? We're putting children in tents. I mean, it's like Joe Arpaio could be running our immigration system. Give them pink underwear and make them sleep out in the heat. So the question is, how long do we put up with this? Is this who we are? Is this the new us? Is this? And what are Democrats going to do about it? Now, obviously, all we keep hearing is that Democrats won't do anything. It's kind of hard to do anything when you're not invited to the table to negotiate. And oh, by the way, just a quick reminder, Republicans control all of the branches of government. If they really wanted to push something through, they could. That's simple. And Trump could stop this with just one phone call. Trump could pick up the phone instead of going, hey, Sean Hannity, how are you? He could go, hey, stop this. Instead of going, hey, tea time open for 11 a.m., he could go, hey, stop this. Instead of the heavy night breathing with Putin, he could go, hey, let's stop this. It makes us look bad internationally. But he's not going to do it. Not going to do it at all, because evidently his petting calls with Hannity, his tea times, and his heavy breathing with Putin are all more important than the other's children. Just a quick thought. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Scott Pruitt, Mr. EPA, and how are folks trying to stop the insanity that is the man with the Superman boot. Quick break, right back.
10% of people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1935. That was the day more than 1,000 locked-out dock workers battled police forces in Vancouver, British Columbia, in the Battle of Ballantine Pier. The dispute began weeks earlier when the Shipping Federation locked out dock workers at Powell River using scabs to unload and load cargo. Shipping magnates feared communist leadership had taken over the company unions they established in the 1920s. Workers at other ports in British Columbia now refused to handle Powell River cargo and were also locked out. Hot cargoing was the main issue, but dockers also demanded higher wages, union recognition, and fair dispatching. The previous year's West Coast waterfront strike had put dock workers everywhere in a fighting mood. In Vancouver, dockers ousted management lackeys from their union and voted in a radical leadership during a recent election. Shipping bosses, local politicians, and businessmen all cried Bolshevik menace. They formed a citizens' league and prepared for battle. And on this day, striking dockers marched to Ballantine Pier, where they had been denied the right to picket. They were determined to stop the scabbing and intended to confront the scabs directly. Led by World War I veteran Mickey O'Rourke, dockers were abruptly stopped at the pier entrance by Vancouver police. Immediately, they were beaten and tear-gassed by club-wielding police and despised specials. Soon, British Columbia Provincial Police and Royal Canadian Mounted Police emerged to join in on the assault. The fighting continued for 3 hours. Police horses trampled many as they tried to escape. Scores were hospitalized and arrested. The strike dragged on for months and ended in defeat. But dockers would win the war through 10 years of hard, dedicated organizing that culminated with an ILWU charter in 1945.
There is no other agency like the EPA. It should really be renamed the Job-Killing Organization of America.
Because, brothers, it's a fact. If we take and don't put back, they'll have to pay for all we did. So let's leave some blue up above us. Let's leave some green on the ground. It's only as tomorrow. Let's save some for tomorrow. We didn't pass it on down.
Oh yeah, good old crazy Michelle Bachmann. As I say, I miss her. I miss the crazy, honestly and truthfully. Anyway, according to those long-haired hippie liberals over at NASA and the NOAA and the Japan Meteorological Agency, May was the 4th warmest month on record. NASA also pointed out that the Northern Hemisphere saw its 3rd warmest period since they began taking records back in 1880. But hey, never mind, nothing to see, move along, no problems here. Let's drill, baby, drill, and burn, baby, burn, and pollute. I'm here to share some thoughts on what's going on with our EPA. And I would argue one of the most dangerous agencies in our government right now, the guy with the Superman phone booth, and really just paranoid as all can be. I've asked Drew Caputo to come talk with us. He's Earth Justice's Vice President of Litigation for Lands, Wildlife, and Oceans. Drew, thanks for taking time for us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Rick.
So we got the guy with the Superman phone booth, which I don't understand. Why does he need the Superman phone booth? Why does he need this skiff? Is what he is saying so important and so super secret that the rest of us can't know about it?
Well, I guess I can come up with 2 explanations. One is ego. That seems like a pretty good explanation. The other is that he spends a lot of time talking to his pals in industry, and he doesn't want the career civil servants at EPA hearing what he has to say. I really think those are the 2 possible explanations.
Yeah, and as we've been finding out from the Freedom of Information Acts, he's had a lot of email contact with captains of industry, and basically selling our air, our water, our future to the lowest bidder.
Yeah, there's never been a presidential administration that was more interested in doing the bidding of industry than this one. It's really pretty sad.
But are you surprised by it? I mean, come on. You go back and you watch the 2016 campaign. I was saying back then, every agency will be weaponized against us. We're going to be going back to the good old days of the 80s and 90s and not the 1980s and 90s. Are you surprised by any of this?
Not really. He was one thing I will give to President Trump is that he was pretty transparent when he was running about what he planned to do. I guess I'm a little surprised that the administration has been as bad on the environment without exception on every single issue. I mean, it is literally the most anti-environmental presidential administration since the dawn of the modern environmental movement. And I don't think a lot of people in November 2016 voted for polluted air or dirty water, but that's where we are right now.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is, I played Michelle Bachmann, that clip right at the beginning for a reason. The Republicans have been saying this for in my view, almost ever. The job killers, Drew.
Yeah, I mean that's their story. I think it's just flat wrong. For example, clean energy through wind or solar power or through energy efficiency is not only better for the environment. These are new industries with new jobs, and that is the 21st century energy picture. And Americans can be either leaders in that, which again matters not just for the environment, but in terms of economic growth, because one of the things Americans are best at is creating new industries and new jobs. Or we can have a backward-looking 1950s style energy policy, which is not only terrible for the environment, but it means we're going to miss out on the opportunity to be a leader in the 21st energy economy, and that's just really sad.
Yeah, I'm with you, but here's the thing: you hit it right on the head. Those are new industries with not a lot of entrenched power, not a lot of huge money to be greasing a lot of palms and making campaign contributions. So it just seems to me that, well, big oil spending a lot of money on lobbying and buying influence.
That's true, but that's where people like Earth Justice come in, because we fight back. One of the great things about America is that everybody has to follow the law. You have to follow the law. I have to follow the law. Scott Pruitt, the head of the EPA, has to follow the law, and so does President Trump. So we have been suing these guys when they've been making decisions that are not only bad for public health and the environment, but they're illegal.
Right.
And we're starting to put together a pretty good track record of winning in court, which I think matters for people, and it also really shows what these guys are up to.
No, I thank goodness that you're doing that, and for right now, I agree with you. That's for now. We have some laws on our side to maybe help stop some of the horrible. But as I watch this administration pack the courts with their types, the fear is that that's no longer the remedy.
Yeah, I understand the fear, and the president is packing the courts with some people who are the appointments seem designed to implement the administration's and the industry's agenda. But the reality is there are hundreds and hundreds of federal judges, all of whom have lifetime tenure. And I think the day before the November 2016 election, there were a number of federal judges who were thinking about retiring. And when they looked at themselves in the bathroom mirror the following morning, I think they decided that maybe they weren't going to retire anytime soon. So I guess I'm an optimist on this. A number of the cases that we have won against the Trump administration for their illegal decisions that we've successfully challenged, we're winning cases in front of judges who were appointed by Republican presidents. So this isn't this is not purely an ideological issue, and there are plenty of judges of all political stripes out there who are prepared to call them as they see them and hold the government accountable when it violates the law, as these guys have made a habit of doing.
Yeah. Because you could make the argument that this administration has been really great for folks like you. I mean, full employment for lawyers, especially environmental lawyers.
Yeah, I'd rather be out on the street with a tin cup and have a president who was protecting public health and the environment than be really busy. But if we've got the president that we've got, then we're going to play our role and we're going to be really busy, and we are really busy.
Because here's the thing that bothers me. The environment is something that you don't realize that it's going south until, it's too late. And, as someone who grew up I grew up in Cleveland in the 1970s, where the lake was basically dead. The only fish you ever saw were floating sideways, looking up at the sky with one eye. The air was terrible. We had acid rain, and the pollution was horrible. Everybody I knew had asthma, including me. And my fear is we end up back there again. That all of the smart things we did through the 80s and 90s to clean up and to make sure that our air and our water are at least somewhat usable, we're undoing it at almost a breakneck pace.
I think you're right to be worried about that, but I have a slightly more positive take. Maybe it's because I'm an optimist. As you know, you grew up in Cleveland, and in the late 1960s, the Cuyahoga River caught fire because
Thanks
of
for
pollution.
that.
Yeah. As a general matter, today America's waters are cleaner than they were in, say, 1972, and also as a general matter, today America's air is cleaner than it was in 1970, and that's not by happenstance. It's because in 1970 we enacted the Clean Air Act. And in 1972, we enacted the Clean Water Act. And those are strong, powerful laws that put obligations on polluters and on the government. And crucially, they allow ordinary citizens like you or me, represented by an organization like Earth Justice, to file suit when either the polluter or the government isn't doing their job. So to me, that means that we are filled with possibility here. We can make progress. We've shown that we can do it over the last 50 years, almost 50 years. And we just need to keep doing it. And the key is that people stand up for what they believe in. I don't think a lot of people, as I said before, voted for dirty air or dirty water or for clear-cut forests or for wildlife species that go extinct. And now is the time for people to stand up and to be heard in whatever way they can. And what we at Earth Justice can do is to file lawsuits to make sure that the environment and people who care about it have a voice in court, and that the government officials have to follow the law just like anybody else.
And that we hold them accountable. You're right. But, part of what gets me is, the messaging that we've heard from the right and from the Trump administration that, that regulations are bad. All regulations are bad, Drew. They're job killers. And, I often talk about the lack of protections and the people killing lack of protections that come out of not having sane, rational regulation.
Yeah, I mean, that is the industry line. The reality is that we have proven in the past few decades that we can have really robust economic growth without destroying the environment. For example, since the turn of the century, the economy has grown by, I want to say, 30% in the aggregate, and greenhouse gas emissions have actually gone down. And that shows that you don't have to. The bad guys want to create a choice. You have to choose either a healthy environment or a healthy economy. And I think we've proven that we can do both. You have to make good choices.
Right.
So if you're going to do dumb things like solve your energy problem by drilling for oil in the Arctic Ocean, then you're not going to be able to have both. But if you make smart energy choices and move in the direction of a high-tech solution based on clean energy, you can have both. And I think that's where America needs to go, both environmentally and economically.
Yeah, I like what California claims they're going to be doing. I think it's by 2020 they're going to pursue having all new homes built with solar panels. I mean, to me, that's a good first step. I would like to see all new construction be energy independent and off the grid. And I would love to have options for people who have pre-existing homes to do the same thing. I mean, we put solar panels on our house, and I think they're fantastic.
Yeah, and they create a lot of freedom, not just again for protecting the environment, but for creating opportunities to spend the money you're saving on something else. I read a really fascinating book once by a historian who said that the reason the United States won the Cold War against the Soviet Union was that after the energy shock of the 1970s, America and the West invested in energy efficiency and freed up a lot of capital that could be used for productive purposes, and the Soviet Union didn't. And I think there's the same lesson now, which is we can either spend money on the old ways of doing things, which are inefficient both energy-wise and economically, or we can move in a better direction, which again, not only protects the environment, but it makes sense for the economy and jobs.
Right. But Drew, all of that hippie liberal green stuff, they're all failures. Solyndra, I can't tell you how many conservatives have thrown Solyndra at me.
Yeah, it's true. There are a bunch of talking points being shopped around by big, powerful, entrenched economic interests like the oil and gas industry that want to protect their gravy train. But, I got to believe that facts matter. One of the things I like about being a lawyer, a litigator, someone who goes to court, is that it's a lot harder to wave away facts, which are evidence, that you don't like and just dismiss it as fake news in court than it is on a lot of cable news channels. So we're just going to keep plugging away because we think that the American people care about the environment. We think that there are win-win solutions out there on energy and other issues that allow us to have a healthy, clean, fair environment and a robust, growing economy with opportunity for people. And we're going to keep plugging away, even if the folks in Washington, D.C. don't really see it that way.
Well, it's stuff we absolutely need. And I'm all on board. So last question, how do we get to that point? What would Drew want our listeners to do? What do we wake up tomorrow doing? What do we wake up the next day doing?
Well, I think this is a time for people to stand up because the forces who are against the environment have a whole lot of control politically and economically. And people can stand up however they want to stand up. They can talk to friends and family about the importance of speaking up to elected officials. They can speak up to elected officials themselves. And if you're interested in what groups like Earth Justice, like what we at Earth Justice do, and you want to learn more about it, I hope you learn more about it. And if you think we're worthy of your support, I hope you'll consider giving us your support.
And we'll get the website out for folks to take a look at it. earthjustice.org is your website. Drew, I appreciate your thoughts. You're taking time. I'd love to have you come back and talk to us again at some point down the road. I'd
love to do that, and I appreciate your generosity in having me on.
Anytime. Good stuff. Drew Caputo, he is the one of the litigators there with the Vice President of Litigation for Lands, Wildlife, and Oceans there at Earth Justice, earthjustice.org, the website. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
This is why we fight, why we lie awake. This is why we fight.
Finally, radio for the rest of us. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1918. That was the day that the St. Paul Federation of Women Teachers, Local 28, received their charter from the American Federation of Teachers. That next February, the Minnesota Women's Union was joined by the St. Paul Federation of Men Teachers, Local 42. Organizing separate locals by gender was common at the time. It was not until 1957 that the teachers united together into one local. One of the founding members of the Women's Local was Mary McGuff. Mary had been a teacher since 1903. She was still an active participant in the union in 1946 when the Women Teachers Local 28 led the first organized teachers' strike in United States history. At the time, the idea of a teachers' strike was practically unheard of. In fact, strikes by public sector workers were explicitly forbidden and illegal. Despite this, 90% of the teachers voted to walk out on strike. The core issues of the strike were improving education, including a demand for smaller class sizes and improving the crumbling infrastructure of the city's public school system. The men's local joined the women on the picket line, but it was the women who organized the action. Mary McGuff was nearly 60 years old at the time. During the 6-week strike, Mary took to the radio. Her voice shared the story of the strike with the public. One striker remembered that Mary was able to cut politicians to threads, but did it in a very ladylike fashion. Finally, the strike ended in victory for the teachers. In 1969, the union established the Mary McGuff Award, which honors teachers for the advancement of education in the St. Paul schools. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So let's go to Washington, D.C. Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Bob, what's going on?
Well, Rick, we are just watching the news of the day.
And it has been a really crazy Monday. Not as much as I had thought, especially after the weekend of all of the stories coming out about what's going on our border. And I got to be honest, I am so tired of people going, but Obama, but Obama. I don't care about Obama. I care about this. I care about Trump. I care about what they're doing right now.
Well, there's actually some mixed messages on this particular issue. There are histories to the past 4 or 5 presidents on how they handled immigration, and some of those histories would maybe surprise people. But in the actual family issue, in 2015, George Bush created called a streamlined program, which President Obama adopted. But those were programs that would allow for prosecution of people if they came illegally, to give the federal government the choice to do that or to bring them in. But in no case was there a policy of separation, either under Bush administration officially or President Obama. There was no separation policy. This direct enforceable policy is new under this administration.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I've gotten a ton of email from conservatives saying, no, Dick Morris and, I forget who the other nitwit is who's running around screaming that, Obama did this. It's all Obama's fault. Trump's just doing what Obama did, so you liberals should shut up.
But like I said, in the research today, I couldn't find cases where, now there might have been some type of potential criminal activity where there was a juvenile, situation, detention. I mean, I understand, about how, if you're going to house families and you're going to house 300 families together, then you have adults and, children together. And that can be tough, not the same family, but other families. And that could be, worrisome. The whole system, I don't know. It's just, I don't know how they finally fix everything. Obviously neither of these bills are going to pass, neither one.
No, anyway. But how do you fix it? I mean, and what is the answer? Because look, I've got friends, I shouldn't say friends because these aren't really friends. I've talked to people who don't care. They're like, you came here, you knew this was going to happen. It happened, get over it. And I'm going, I don't think anyone knew this was going to happen. This, as you pointed out, is new policy. This is a new zero tolerance enforcement. And the other part of this, a lot of these people are coming here seeking asylum, which is different than trying to cross the border like thieves in the night.
Right. And that's where it'll take diligence for immigration to, look at, basically it's case by case and situation by situation. But again, there's nothing that they're going to pass next week, or this week. I think both bills will fail. And they weren't really an entire solution. Now, one of the bills did say about the, where they were going to entertain about the separation policy.
Yeah, at the end of this, I as I was looking over the weekend, I'm going, I know Joe Arpaio's out as sheriff. Is he taking over our immigration system? Is he the guy who's now housing these people? Because, I'd read stories that, they're setting up tent camps everywhere.
In Arizona?
Yeah.
What?
No, along the border where, where a lot of these places are, where they're setting up little tent camps.
Oh, okay.
It's crazy. Just crazy. I threw Arpaio in there because of his tent prison. Next thing, and the other thing I thought of is, in 10 or 15 years, is someone going to be asking, why do these people hate us? I was reading another Washington Post article that said that, the enforcement people, the prison guards, or however you want to title them, are told not to try and console the kids, not to touch them, not to talk to them. And you go, really? 3, 4, 5, 10-year-old kids? Really?
Like I said, if people are going to be here, then they're going to have the ability to take care of people, or they have jurisprudence and it's done timely and accurately. If cases lay around 3 or 4 years, people have to be taken care of for 3 or 4 years.
It's crazy. So is there a way that this ever gets fixed? Because, I find myself somewhere, not on either extreme of, you build the giant wall, keep everybody out, or swing the doors wide open and let everybody in. Is there a happy median here? Is there somewhere that this gets fixed, or are we going to be fighting over this for the next 50 years?
I think it's going to be a long, long haul. Now, they can have enhanced security, which is fine, at the border. But but then there's going to be a lot of cases of people that still want to, be able to come here. I'll tell you what worries me, honestly, and it'll be the unforeseen, Rick. I will tell you this. I personally know of cases, where people were applying for either fiancé visas or, student visas or work visas, and they are being denied in droves. Now, you're not going to read about this. You're not going to hear about this anywhere, but it's happening. I mean, fact, I know it for sure. So that's the legal process. So that's being dismantled piece by piece.
Wow. So what you're basically saying is, this administration's not, they're slamming the door tight behind us.
Yeah, it's legal. I mean, I had a student that called me just within the last week from overseas, and he said, they're denying them right one after the other. And by the way, they're not even telling them why. There were two people from Dharamsala, India, Tibetans, to come to Miami of Ohio, a full ride scholarship worth $150,000 each, denied.
Wow.
For what reason? Right.
I didn't think they denied any student visas.
Oh yeah, denied.
Especially when you're talking about that kind of money.
I know them because the one was standing crying in the street asking me if there's anything that could be done. So, these aren't, they're not from, quote, terrorist country or such a thing, and it's happening. So there's your, when it's one thing if you want to talk about, security, and I'm with you. I'm somewhere in the middle. You want to talk about, but what about the legal immigration? They're trying to, contain that.
So not only are you trying to slam the door on the undocumented people coming across, even the people who want to come here the right way. And for all those people who say, my grandparents and great-grandparents, they came here the right way. And I'm going, well, I got to be honest, my ancestors, they came on a boat. I don't know if it was the right or wrong way. They just showed up.
Well, and then here's the other problem. Nobody is going to dig into what I just told you. Nobody. They're not going to get statistics. They're not going to know. It's going to be done by faceless people in embassies across the world because it's a wink and nod thing.
Wow.
And they don't even have to tell you why. And
you wonder why they hate us.
Yeah. So it's just where's this headed to?
Crazy. Let's move on. Gerrymandering. The two Supreme Court cases today evidently remanded back.
I don't know where this all ends to. I don't think the court will ever be able to solve it, probably. You have movements in states, fair redistricting. We had one in Ohio 3 or 4 different times, I guess.
We've
had them. Yeah, you've got one now. And I don't think that the court for a long, long time is going to intervene and say, this is what we are going to tell. They might intervene and say, you have to have X amount of percentage of districts, and they'll still look at the minority voters or something, but I just don't think that they're going to step in and do anything with this.
Yeah, I thought if there was ever going to be a chance, it would be Dow, because you had two cases on opposite ends of the political spectrum. You had one of a Republican state and one of a kind of a heavily Democratic gerrymander, and this would have been kind of going, hey, these extremes are too much. There's got to be something more towards the middle. And they chose not to. They chose not to do anything.
Right. They just punted it.
I think there's only, another week or 2 left in this term?
Yes.
And they've got a ton of cases yet that have not been rolled out. I guess there's Thursday and Monday that maybe possibly, because I'm waiting for the Janus decision to be rendered. And today I was going, maybe today. And no.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because you're on that case a lot. I was going to ask you if you thought that was coming.
I said from the very beginning when it was heard that it will be the very last thing decided. As they're running out the door, they'll go, "Oh, hey, by the way," and throw it behind them. Because I think it could be that kind of toxic and that kind of to get people riled and into the streets, and as I believe it should.
Right, it's a huge case.
It's enormous. It changes the fabric of this country, and it changes our government saying that we encourage collective bargaining. I mean, it's a massive shift from the New Deal era labor peace to a 19th century kind of labor environment, which is not a good one. Let's move on. Food stamps on the decline. Is that accurate?
Well, they are on the decline, but I guess we have to look at the particular reasons why. and it's not necessarily all, economic. I think some of the enforcement or the crackdown on it may have something to do with those stats too.
Yeah, because, well, I mean, with 3.9% or 3.8 or whatever it is now, you would expect food stamps to come down. But as I was reading through it, it's not for the reasons that we think, because there's so many low-wage workers that have to go and ask for food stamps because, sorry, all the jobs that people have and with all the low unemployment, they're still not putting enough money in the pocket to put food on the table.
Right. Underemployment, and it's big. And so that, creates awful problem for people.
I mean, it's crazy.
Underemployment.
And to me, the idea of food stamps is actually a really good idea in my view, because you can only buy it on certain things. It's meant to help feed families, especially children. The party of family values should be all in this. And, oh, by the way, it has a massive reverberation effect across the economy and enriches the very wealthy. They should be thrilled to death about it.
Sure. I mean, I would assume.
Very, very, just, I mean, it just seems to me so mean-spirited, and we wonder why suicide rates have gone up. We wonder why, a lot of this negative stuff, just keeps skyrocketing as anger
and dissatisfaction and everything else that comes along with it. And, people can't, somebody said the other day, well, certain wages were good. Well, if you just take base, insurance, rent, automobile, and I'm not talking new, and automobile insurance, utilities, you're about there.
Yeah, I mean, it's inflation has gone up. I know they say it hasn't, but just the cost to live has gone through the roof. And
absolutely,
ask anybody trying to figure it out. And look, I'm explaining this to my oldest daughter, who's she's 16. She's thinking about, hey, a couple years down the road, I'm going to get my own apartment. I'm going to have my own car. Life is going to be great. I'm going to do what I want when I want. And then you start explaining, this is the cost. And she's like, well, because she's got a good job. She's making $10 an hour as a 16-year-old. And you go, she's like, oh, I got all this money. I'm going, it's not that much.
Right.
It's great when you're 16. When you're 21, it's going to be a struggle.
Right. Exactly.
It's crazy. And finally, some Trump buddies could be in a little hot water. Add them to the list, really?
Well, Roger Stone and Mike Caputo, and I don't understand why Roger Stone wants to go out and talk about all these things. Now, what the story is saying is that he has said one thing about this Russian contact who wanted $2 million to give them dirt on Hillary Clinton. And then the question is, did he tell Mueller that, or he told Mueller's people that he didn't have that contact? So I don't know why they are insistent on going out and, saying those types of things, because if they did do that with the Fed, then it could be a perjury charge.
Yeah. My grandfather always said, you have the right to remain silent. Use it.
It's true. Well, he's not using it. Roger Stone, you know him anyway, like to talk.
Oh no, he loves to be the center of attention, and he, I've met him a couple of times. Likes to believe he's the smartest guy in the room.
Mm-hmm. And he likes to be outrageous, and he's been known to tell, whopping lies.
That's why I think he fit really so well in with this administration.
I don't say, the mistruths, but whopping lies. Roger's done it. He's done it against Republicans.
As my grandfather would say, there's a guy who'd lie when the truth would be better.
Be better, true.
Scary stuff. Oh, look, we can hopefully add them to the line of folks I'm hoping will be perp walked in the Trump parade of convicted folks after the Mueller investigation wraps up.
Well, something's coming,
which I'm hoping is soon. I'm told to be on my toes this or next week, so we'll see where it goes.
Yes.
Bob, I appreciate the time. Great stuff.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good friend Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1942. That was the day that an historic meeting took place at the White House. Black labor leader A. Philip Randolph, along with the head of the NAACP, sat down to talk with President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The topic of the meeting was ending discrimination against black workers in war industries. Although the U.S. had not yet entered World War II, factories had ramped up production in support of the Allied forces. That year, U.S. factories shipped out nearly 5.5 billion tons of weapons, artillery, planes, and ships. Yet black workers found themselves shut out of many of these production jobs. Only 204 of more than 100,000 of those who manufactured airplanes were black. Black workers were blocked from 250,000 jobs. Determined to break this color barrier, Randolph began to organize a march on Washington, D.C. The plan was to demand war industry integration. President Roosevelt was eager to avoid the threatened march. He knew that the event would undercut the idea of the United States as a bastion of democracy. At his wife Eleanor's urging, he decided to meet with Randolph. Randolph refused to call off the march unless the president had ordered an end to hiring discrimination. Randolph refused to call off the march unless the president ordered an end to the hiring discrimination. In his call to march on Washington, Randolph had declared, "Nothing counts but pressure." He kept up the pressure, insisting to be allowed to read the draft of the president's executive order. Only when it was edited to Randolph's satisfaction did he call off the demonstration. The result was Presidential Executive Order 8802. It declared, "There shall be no discrimination in employment of workers in the defense industries or government because of race, creed, color, or national origin."
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
We want the world and we want it now. We're gonna take it anyhow. We want the airwaves. That's right. We want the airwaves. That's right. We want the airwaves, baby. If rockets gonna stay alive.
So I think my favorite tweet today is from Ted Lieu. The congressman tweeted out, "Dear Secretary Nelson," Chris Jen, the head of Homeland Security, he says, quote, "I don't give a giant steaming pile of you-know-what if you apologize. We just need you to reverse your policy of ripping kids away from parents. Also, how do you go from saying such a policy doesn't exist to now saying you won't apologize for it? Why all the lies from Homeland Security?" That's a very good question. Because if you remember, it wasn't happening, and then it was. It was Obama's doing, and then, well, it's not. Nothing this administration says, and again, that funny line of, "We can tell you're lying because your lips are moving." Here it is, front and center. And over the weekend, you had Beto O'Rourke, Representative Kennedy, you had a number of activists down in Texas, who made the drive from El Paso down to Tornillo, and 100-degree temperatures, where evidently there are about 200 kids in custody in these, I don't know, these tent kind of communities, locked up in these cages. Now we're told that the tents have air conditioning, so it can't be all bad. And you look at this stuff and you just go, nothing good comes of this. There was a story of this Michelle Brain. She's the director of migrant rights for the Women's Refugee Commission. She told a story of, she met with this 16-year-old girl that she had to teach how to change a diaper because there was a young girl that they thought was like 2 or 3 years old that was in there by itself. So this young girl was in there, and this 16-year-old girl and a couple others had to change the diaper of this baby. And you go, how is it possible? Now, you stop and you think about this for a second. If any parent in this country pulled this kind of stuff, lock kids in a dog crate, put them in a tent out in the backyard, and lock them up, they'd be held accountable. There would be people knocking on their doors. In fact, they wouldn't be knocking, they'd be kicking them in. And then you hear these stories of, this woman told a story of, you've got, this little kid, who evidently turned out to be 4, not 2. But, nobody could understand it because, the kid spoke some other dialect and, but was just curled up in the corner. And, this woman's telling stories of how the guards are yelling at these kids who are like 5 or 6 years old for trying to play, trying to have some semblance of normalcy. No books, no toys, nothing. Just locked up in a cage with a bunch of other kids, sleeping on the floor on mats under these. Is this who we are? Is this the new us? Also, the most disgusting story came out today from Texas. Evidently, a deputy sheriff down in the Texas area, a guy named Jose Nunez. He's a deputy with the Bexar County Sheriff's Department there in Texas, arrested on a warrant of super aggravated sexual assault. Super aggravated. I didn't even know you had super aggravated sexual assault until you find out that the 47-year-old evidently molested a 4-year-old. And to cover it up, threatened the mother, blackmailed the mother to shut up or would be deported. This is the kind of stuff that comes up when you do what we're doing. This is the kind of insanity that comes along. And what's frustrating to me is that there are people in this country who are going, this is what we need to be doing. Over the weekend, I talked to a couple of guys who were going, you know what? It's what we should be doing. I'm all behind Trump on this. Make it as miserable on these people. Slam the doors, kick them out, do what you got to do. And I guess I'm not sure what it was. I don't know if it was, the Catholic upbringing that I had, even though I was beaten and broken. They still talked about social justice and they talked about equality and talked about, love thy neighbor and as thyself and, feed the hungry and, clothe the naked and care for the sick and the poor. And I remember being, just beaten with those themes. When did that all change? When did it all change from what I grew up believing Christianity to be to what it is today, which is hooray for me and the hell with everybody else? And if you didn't win the birth lottery, well, we're going to slam the door, not just in your face, but on your toes. I struggle with that. Now, look, I don't know what the answer is. I'm not somebody who says we swing open the doors and flood everybody in. I'm also not someone who says you slam the door so tight that nobody ever gets in. But at some point, we've got to be figuring out how we solve these problems in a way that doesn't, put us in this situation. Like it or not, the rest of the world looks to this country, looks to us for moral guidance, and I have no idea why. But they look towards us to be better. And yet, with this administration, I don't know that there's anything better coming. And I look at this story of this deputy sheriff, this stuff goes on all the time. And my problem with having these kind of regressive laws and these repressive laws that keep people in the shadows is sickos like this guy have the ability to threaten people into the shadows and into silence. There's something just seriously, seriously wrong with this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Are you a supporter? Think it's the right thing to do? Is this how we should be doing it? Is it Obama's fault? Love to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Chris Stroop's going to be here to share some of his thoughts on, why is it the evangelical community, the moral compass of the country, how come they're not having anything to say about this? Quick break. Right back with Chris.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
The man who sends the investor class diving for their tax shelters. Rick Smith.
The rich pay too much taxes, the poor get way too much. Instead of schools, build prisons and lock the children up. We won't believe those lies again, because God is a Republican.
Ah, yes, lock those kids up. And as I said earlier, you know, the amazing thing is you look at what we do to American kids. I haven't done anything on the gun issue. Our kids are getting slaughtered in schools. I haven't done anything to make sure that all kids get health insurance or access to quality food or shelter or any of that stuff. So you look at what we do to our own kids. Imagine what we'd be willing to do to others. So not surprising. And not surprising that 58% of Republicans approve of the policy that this administration is pulling. Just 5% of Democrats, 27% of independents. This is where the other thing gets just bizarre. Of Trump supporters, 62% approve of what Trump is doing. Those 39% who are always there, and 51% of self-described conservatives. Now, white evangelicals, wow. In January, the Washington Post did a poll. 75% of white evangelicals rated the federal crackdown on undocumented immigrants as positive. Scary, scary stuff. And here to share some thoughts on just how scary it is, I've asked our good friend Chris Stroop to come talk with us. Chris is the founder of the hashtags Empty the Pews and Christian Alt Facts. Chris, thanks for taking time for us.
You're very welcome, Rick. Thanks for having me.
So, should I be surprised that the number is as high as it is for white evangelical Christians to support this horrible policy when they're the ones who are telling us they're the people of family values?
Well, when that was taken in January, we didn't have a lot of information about the separation of families from children, or we didn't know that was a policy at that time. We have seen some white evangelicals, some of the leaders anyway, speaking out specifically against the separation of children from families when their families are crossing borders to apply for asylum. Of course, that very policy is a violation of international law. You can't criminalize people who are applying for asylum, but we're doing it. We've seen a few speaking out, so I think we might see the 75% favorability that they have for Donald Trump right now fall some, but I doubt it will fall anywhere below the mid-60s, and probably not even that low. They're definitely prioritizing their agenda. They usually, the more educated ones want to be respectful. They certainly don't like to admit that they're racist, but they're racist. And they do support white supremacy. They vote to uphold white supremacy constantly. So they're not too terribly concerned with brown families at the border. So it is extremely hypocritical because in the United States, they have a lot of organs, like through the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, for example, constantly sends its subscribers propaganda saying that CPS wants to take your children away, the government wants to take your children away. They use fear-mongering to keep homeschooling from being regulated. And now they're sort of maybe making a few verbal gestures in the direction of, well, we don't think that we should be separating children from families at the border, but are they going to do anything about it? I think is the more important question. And they won't.
Good point.
Good take in the Washington Post by an article by Julie Zosmer. She noted that white evangelicals are much quieter than the other religious groups who are speaking out against this policy.
Well, could it be that just, they don't, like you said, they don't really care, and they've got their whole other separate agenda that they're pursuing and don't want to tick Trump off?
Sure, absolutely. He's in their corner, they're in his corner, they're not going to turn their backs on him. I was surprised that Franklin Graham used strong language, which is good, calling the policy disgraceful, but then, of course, he immediately moved to try to deflect and as much responsibility from Republicans as possible. And again, I think that's really a PR move. Evangelicals are realizing right now, as we've been exposing them partly through hashtags like Empty the Pews, Nutritional Facts, and Church Too, that they are under the microscope. And, you know, all these abuse scandals recently have blown up, particularly in the Southern Baptist Convention. And so at their annual meeting, which took place very recently, they were sort of cowed. They tried to back away from this vigorous culture war stance without actually changing anything. But, you know, they did pass a resolution saying that they support keeping families together, as well as that they support secure borders. For example, they passed some resolutions on women and abuse. They actually passed a resolution saying that the Southern Baptist Convention supports women going into the authorities if they're abused by their husbands.
Whoa, stop. You know, just this year, 2018, that this is the first time they've done that?
Yeah, I believe so. And it's because all these scandals broke where many women spoke out and started saying, you know, our pastor, he told me I should go back to my husband and just try to submit to him more and suffer, and maybe God will use me to save his soul, bring him back to church, that kind of thing. So yeah, in many cases. And again, you know, when you have this annual meeting, you have the Southern Baptist Convention and the kind of the leadership, they are not, the things that they say, they're very slick about PR. They realize that they need to try to salvage their image, and I think we need to not make that easy for them. They didn't change anything about the theology. They still teach the same theology they call complementarianism, which is basically a strict patriarchal theology that teaches that men and women have distinct roles. Women are never allowed to have authority over men. They shouldn't work outside the home if possible. They're not allowed to teach men. They can't be pastors. They didn't change any of that, nor did they change their stance on LGBTQ identities. You know, they still think homosexuality is a sin, and they still deny that transgender people really exist. They elected a slicker, younger, more charismatic president in J.D. Greer, but he supports all this same toxic theology. So what's really going to change on the ground? Nothing. And you know, it's easy for leaders to say, oh, we don't think Donald Trump should be separating children from their parents at the border. But what are the people in the pews saying? You know,
I often wonder, how is it possible that there are any women in the pews? I mean, if that's the theology, what woman in her right mind would subject herself to that? I mean, I sure hope my daughters never do.
Well, you know, this is how white supremacist American patriarchy has always worked. White women often sign on to the project, whether Catholic or Protestant. Think of Phyllis Schlafly, for example, because they still have that status, you know, over people of color. It's also, when you're raised in that environment, you're thoroughly indoctrinated. Fear, manipulation, control. It's very hard to break away from your family. So if it works okay for you, you know, or if you can make it work, you're going to say, or even if you're suffering, you might think that God wants you to suffer. And you'll just try to kind of carry on in quiet desperation.
So basically, anything in the name of God or anything in the Bible, we can justify just about anything with it. I mean, I look at Jeff Sessions the other day and his justifying this horrible policy by saying, well, you know, it's in the Bible. The Bible, you know, it says that, you know, God, you know, believes in government and government can do no wrong, and so that's it.
Yeah, Romans 13, obviously not a very contextualized or nuanced reading, but one that has a long history in the United States, and not only. I mean, that passage was frequently quoted by slave owners to support slavery. You know,
so it wouldn't be. It's not surprising that Sessions would have that right there on the tip of his tongue.
No,
not saying that he was a slave owner. Maybe he would have wanted to be. We had just done away with it by the time he had a chance.
I mean, kind of by citing that verse specifically, he sort of let the cat out of the bag on the racism of Christian right, and I think that's what sparked people like Franklin Graham to try and, you know, cover their bases and speak out against policy. I think it was really Sessions and Sanders defending it on the basis of the Bible that sent them scrambling. But again, they're scrambling to preserve their image, not to actually do anything about this policy.
No, I mean, it's more about because the image is money. I mean, and this is maybe you tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that the image is all about the money.
I mean, it's money. It's also power and control. when we talk about fundamentalists, I mean, we talk about paranoid authoritarian people who have sort of created God in their image, and this God that they worship is also punitive and paranoid and tyrannical. So he can be invoked to justify whatever they want to justify.
Now, you've written a piece over at Playboy talking about Jeff Sessions, this new type of Christianity. This, I guess the Sessions type is how you talked about it. How pervasive is this in society? Or because as you point out that both Hillary Clinton and Sessions are both of the same faith. I would argue different understandings, though.
United Methodist Church. And the UMC is the mainline denomination, so at least at the more elite level, it tends to be somewhat more moderate to progressive in its politics than evangelical denominations do. So it is kind of weird that Sessions is Methodist, but he is. But he's much closer in his politics to evangelical Protestants and to sort of hardline traditionalist Catholics than he is to many in his own Methodist denomination. I don't really think this kind of Christianity is particularly new. It's something that comes up frequently in history when you have Christianity tied to power. And I think to understand what's going on in this country with the Trump regime, you really do have to look at it in terms of theocracy. I mean, he has surrounded himself with a cabinet full of radical Protestants. And he's got a few radical Catholics around him as well. The vice president is a radical Protestant. And they are working towards the same agenda that they've been talking about for all these years. And I think they have a real shot at banning abortion, for example. I think Roe can be overturned if they get another Supreme Court justice. Obergefell will probably be overturned if they get another Supreme Court justice. And they're trying as hard as they can.
Yeah, and one of the other things you pointed out in your article is that Romans 13 was one of the favorite passages of the Nazis. And I know a lot of people are making comparisons between Trump and then that time in our world's history. Is that a fair comparison, though?
Well, Steve Bannon made it himself back during the campaign. If you remember saying things were going to be as exciting as the 1930s. And I think that, there are some parallels that can be drawn. It's not going to be an exact repeat, but the kind of rhetoric that Trump uses in surrogates and certainly his supporters and base use surrounding Muslims, surrounding foreigners applying for asylum, is the kind of dehumanizing rhetoric that precedes genocide. That doesn't mean that genocide necessarily follows, but it's a necessary condition. It's not a sufficient condition, but it's frightening and we should be concerned.
No, I know some way out evangelical types, and the weird thing is they're gun nuts too.
Oh yeah.
And it's one of those things that, I've had these conversations over the years that, the extreme right, especially the religious right, they're well armed. If there was ever a civil war, you anti-gun liberals, you be afraid and I've made the argument that, maybe the left needs to arm up pretty soon because we're not heading in a good place.
I'll admit that I've thought about it. I've never owned a gun or had much desire to, but given how scary things are, I've thought about it myself, whatever that says about me.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump could be the great gun the great gun saver, the guy who saves the gun industry, like Obama did during his 8 years, just from the other side.
That being said, I would still support quite robust gun control, gun regulation. Not to say ban guns altogether, but we need to do something.
No, absolutely. But here's the thing, and this takes me back to where we started. You look at these people; they're doing absolutely nothing to protect our children. What makes us think that these folks are going to do anything to protect someone else's kids?
Yeah, I mean, a few minutes before that, you were talking. You said something to the effect of, we're keeping these children in cages. We're not giving them proper care. They're being neglected. Americans doing this, their own children will be prosecuted. Well, homeschooling families very often do engage in extreme forms of neglect and abuse, and they don't get prosecuted for it. And every once in a while, remember we talked about this sometime back on your show, every once in a while there's a big flare-up like that family in California that had the 14 children chained to bed and called it a homeschool and treated them terribly and forced them to memorize Bible verses. It's precisely these radical paranoid Christians who are very slick at getting religious exemptions to the laws or getting homeschooling to be basically unregulated, who commit these kinds of abuses. And it's the same population that will say kick their kids out of their homes if they come out as gay or transgender. And this is why 40% of the homeless population, the homeless youth population in this country is LGBT. Their Christian parents kick them out of their homes. We should clarify, of course, not all evangelicals. I certainly, I'm sure that, if I come out as queer or younger, my parents would not have kicked me out. I'm not 100% sure that I wouldn't have been subjected to conversion therapy.
And that's kind of a vile.
Oh, it is. It's torture. It's psychological torture.
So again, I go back to what I said from the beginning. It's not surprising to me that they would be okay with what's going on to other people's children when they subject their own kids to this kind of stuff.
No, absolutely. And this is why we shouldn't take the rhetoric of someone like Franklin Graham or even Southern Baptist Convention leaders at face value when they say, "Oh, we don't support this separation of children from their parents' border." They're really just trying to protect their reputation. In this kind of authoritarian subculture, reputation always takes precedence over people.
So last line of questioning I've got for you, because, I have these conversations occasionally and I'll bring this stuff up and people look at me like I've got a third head. In fact, I was just talking to my aunt the other night about, the 19 and counting people and cause she's actually watched it, I guess, a couple of times, not somebody who watches it all the time, but, it was, they're a nice family. I'm going, no, they're kind of crazy. And the whole movement that they were the kind of head of, kind of crazy. And she, until I went through and explained what we've talked about, she had no idea. And I think most people have no idea that there's this subculture, this undercurrent of crazy going on right under our noses.
Yeah, the Duggars are not a nice family. Quiverful is not a nice thing. It's an extreme form of Christian patriarchy, in which children are basically treated like the property of their parents until the men become old enough to marry and leave the home, and the women are then transferred to husbands. Their whole education, to the extent that they get one, tends to be focused on becoming a good homemaker and quote-unquote help meet their future husbands. The purity culture is just nuts. Lots of abuse happens within that, and of course Josh Duggar himself molested several girls, including his own sister. That whole scandal broke.
Yeah, I mean that.
Yeah, he's going with this is also part of the whole Christian alt-facts thing, hashtag, another hashtag that I created. The curriculum that is frequently used for homeschools and Christian schools is full of alternative facts, right? So, kind of been ironically throwing that phrase around and abbreviated it from Christian alternative facts to Christian alt-facts. But yeah, they teach not only things like the United States Christian country, South African apartheid was basically good because the black Africans never built up a good civilization on their own. It's full of things like that and more. The Loch Ness Monster is real and proves that dinosaurs coexisted with humans and died off sometime after Noah's flood. They teach all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite stories is, and one of these days I really want to get down to Kentucky to go to the Creationist Museum. To go on the Ark, where evidently there are dinosaurs on the Ark.
It's two separate museums, the Creation Museum and Ark Counter. I've been thinking about doing that too. Maybe we should go together.
I would absolutely love that. We could do a kind of a podcast of it.
Yeah.
I'll take a little undercover video camera and you can explain just how crazy it all really is. Scary stuff. And if you look at Kentucky, evidently their Board of Education just okayed Bible literacy standards in their public schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, the Bible has had such an important impact on history and culture that I don't disapprove of teaching about it in school in a proper way, but I don't trust they're going to do it in a proper way.
That's my problem.
Yeah.
Crazy is as crazy does. But Chris, I appreciate the thoughts, the time. Every time I talk to you, I walk away just going, we're screwed.
I'm sorry, Rick. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Chris. Good stuff. There's somebody you absolutely want to follow on Twitter and follow the hashtags as well. The Empty the Pews hashtag and also Christian Alt Facts. Our good friend Chris Stroop. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. come to talk.
Exposing that free trade is never free. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1935. That was the day more than 1,000 locked-out dock workers battled police forces in Vancouver, British Columbia, in the Battle of Ballantine Pier. The dispute began weeks earlier when the Shipping Federation locked out dock workers at Powell River using scabs to unload and load cargo. Shipping magnates feared communist leadership had taken over the company unions they established in the 1920s. Workers at other ports in British Columbia now refused to handle Powell River cargo and were also locked out. Hot cargoing was the main issue, but dockers also demanded higher wages, union recognition, and fair dispatching. The previous year's West Coast waterfront strike had put dock workers everywhere in a fighting mood. In Vancouver, dockers ousted management lackeys from their union and voted in a radical leadership during a recent election. Shipping bosses, local politicians, and businessmen all cried Bolshevik menace. They formed a citizens' league and prepared for battle. And on this day, striking dockers marched to Ballantine Pier, where they had been denied the right to picket. They were determined to stop the scabbing and intended to confront the scabs directly. Led by World War I veteran Mickey O'Rourke, dockers were abruptly stopped at the pier entrance by Vancouver police. Immediately, they were beaten and tear-gassed by club-wielding police and despised specials. Soon, British Columbia Provincial Police and Royal Canadian Mounted Police emerged to join in on the assault. The fighting continued for 3 hours. Police horses trampled many as they tried to escape. Scores were hospitalized and arrested. The strike dragged on for months and ended in defeat. But dockers would win the war through 10 years of hard, dedicated organizing that culminated with an ILWU charter in 1945. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. I'll tell you, every time Chris comes on, it's just one of those things where I can it really be this crazy? I mean, can we use religion in this kind of a way? And the answer is absolutely. I mean, we've been killing each other and doing all kinds of crazy stuff in the name of religion forever. And, you know, it's almost like a whole cult kind of thing. That we're seeing right before our very eyes. And it's scary stuff in that, you know, you look at, I can't imagine why a woman would stay in that kind of environment. It's foreign to my understanding. And yet, as Chris points out, you know, you've got all of this, you know, the family pressures, it's how you were raised, the brainwashing that goes into it. And, you know, I remember watching the one movie, it was called Jesus Camp, where it was kind of the first eye-opening moment that I had in looking at just how way off the beaten path these folks were. Look, I had known a couple of, you know, really far out kind of Baptist, you know, religious fanatics when I was a kid. You know, my best friend, you know, in high school, his father was really nuts. His mother was, she just went along with being nuts. But he was just completely off the rocker. And, you know, some of the insane kind of goofy stuff that he used to do. And I remember, you know, my friend going, you know, the second I turn 18, I am so out of here. Because he got it as a, you know, 15, 16-year-old kid, just how crazy this was. And I got to be honest, I kind of look at this and I go, you know, what kid growing up doesn't look at that and go, this isn't right. This isn't normal. unless, as Chris points out, they're all in the same kind of scenario, and it, scary. And again, another reason that I'm not a big supporter of homeschooling. Just not. If you want to teach your kids more at home, that's great. But the public schools are where you get a lot of socialization skills, learn how to deal with different peoples and different cultures and all of that. And maybe some of the craziness gets just absolutely mind-blowing to me. Just crazy. Anyway, real quick, evidently on Saturday, the Chinese were all upset, claiming that the U.S. launched a trade war because Trump had come out and said on Friday that we're going to slap tariffs on $50 billion worth of Chinese goods, 25% tariff. And as I've said, and we can argue about it all you want, I'm a supporter of pursuing a way to reel in our extreme trade deficits with China. And look, the thing that gets me is in 1985, we had a $6 million trade deficit with China. $6 million. And you move forward through the permanent normal trade relations status under Clinton in 2000 and ultimately under Bush in 2001, where we were going from $6 million trade deficit in 1985, to $1 billion in 87, to a couple billion in 90, up until the point where you were getting into the $100 billion range. And over since 2010, the last 7 years of record, we've had, just mind-blowingly, this enormous amount of trade deficit with them. Something like $2.6 trillion in trade deficits. And, the idea that, there's a trade war going on. Yes, there is. And we are getting our hats handed to us. In 2017, we bought $506 billion worth of stuff from the Chinese. They bought $130 billion of our stuff. We had $375 billion trade deficit. And what does that mean? It means we bought more from them than they bought from us, which means we lose jobs. Our standard of living goes down because their cost of doing things much cheaper. But hey, I know we get cheap stuff. And it's kind of hard to enjoy the cheap stuff when you don't have any money. And you look at the reality, as we talked about with Bob Ney in the last hour. You still have people at 3.8% unemployment rate, and wages are basically stagnant, and you still have millions of people who need food stamps. It comes back to this. And look, I don't like Trump. I'm afraid he's going to screw this up royally. But at some point, it's got to be done. When you look at these massive deficits that we're running with one country, there's a problem. So today, Trump said, okay, well, if you're going to slap tariffs on our stuff, we're going to go after $200 billion worth of your stuff. And I don't know where this ends or how this ramps up, but at some point, we've got to address our massive deficit. And at some point, the Chinese are either going to have to open up their markets to more of our products, or we're going to have to close off our markets to some of theirs. It is that simple. And I am not opposed to either. I'm not opposed to closing off our market to them. We're still one of the largest consumer market in the world. If you make something, you want to sell something, this is the market you have to be in. At some point, we do have to use that clout. And it has to benefit us and not just the big multinational companies who ran away from this country. As soon as Clinton signed PNRT and Bush signed onto it too, companies were leaving this country in droves. You go, oh, well, we lost all these jobs. We lost 5 million manufacturing jobs. We didn't lose them. We know exactly where they are. They moved to China so they could exploit cheaper labor and more lax regulations. And they could put in their pocket a ton more money. It's about time we did something. And the fact that Trump's doing it scares me. Scares me a lot because I do think he's going to booger it up. We'll take a quick break. Right back.
And I'll go to work at night. I got no time for living, yes, I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me
They call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
He is about as swampy as you get.
EPA Chief Scott Pruitt finally losing support among Republicans amid another new scandal.
We see an increased vulnerability to ice loss from Antarctica.
Antarctica's ice melting 3 times faster than predicted. DNC bans corporate fossil fuel donations. Plus, electric cars have become so cheap to drive, even the Trump administration can't ignore them.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Well, look, I care so much about taxpayer money, but these distractions largely, I think, have emanated from the great work that we've been doing.
Actually, they emanate from the fact that you're a corrupt fossil fuel stooge. Other than that, keep up the good work, Scott Pruitt. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I can't believe we're covering Scott Pruitt again. I can't believe he still has a job.
Yes, but at least Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Scott Pruitt is now losing support among high-profile Republicans for his numerous ethics scandals and lavish spending. For his latest scandal, Washington Post reports that Pruitt pressured an EPA employee on government time to contact wealthy Republican donors to give his wife a job.
I have no snarky comments left.
That prompted Fox News host Laura Ingraham this week to call for Pruitt to be fired for his, quote, bad judgment. And in a podcast interview with Platts media outlet, Iowa Republican Senator Joni Ernst was blunt.
He is about as swampy as you get here in Washington, D.C. And if the president wants to drain the swamp, he needs to take a look at his own cabinet.
This week, the America Future Fund, a nonprofit right-wing group that does not disclose its donors, has launched a new TV ad campaign criticizing Pruitt.
Scott Pruitt is a swamp monster. Mr. President, you know what to do.
Get fired.
For the good of the country, Pruitt must go.
A swamp monster.
Of course, note that they are mad at Pruitt for making Trump look bad, not for harming the health of Americans.
Right, and Joni Ernst is mad because she comes from Iowa, a corn state, and Scott Pruitt is messing with ethanol.
Meanwhile, in a victory for activists and environmental advocates, the Democratic National Committee has quietly voted to unanimously ban contributions from fossil fuel companies and corporate political action committees associated with fossil fuel companies.
Good for them. Why are they doing it quietly?
That's an excellent question. The DNC ban does not affect the 2 other major party committees to elect Democrats to the House and the Senate, the DCCC or the DSCC. Antarctica is melting faster than scientists anticipated, according to an international team of ice experts publishing in the journal Nature. Antarctica's melt rate has tripled in the last 6 years due to warming oceans melting ice sheets from underneath.
That's not good.
Nope. The scientists warn that if the ice continues to melt at this faster rate, it poses a grim future for the world's coastal cities and low-lying countries where more than 1 billion people live, causing irreversible sea level rise much faster than predicted, giving those communities much less time to prepare than previously hoped.
No wonder Donald Trump didn't want to sit in on that session about sea level rise at the G7.
Meanwhile, here in the U.S., a new National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration study finds that coastal flooding has doubled in the United States over the last 30 years, with a rapid increase in high tide flooding. That's flooding even on sunny days, even in the absence of any storms. Such high tide flooding used to occur only during major storms, maybe once in a decade, but according to NOAA, some U.S. cities saw more than 20 days of high tide flooding in just the last year.
That's not good either.
That's already affecting the value of the housing market in Florida. A new Harvard study finds that as nuisance flooding increases with rising seas, homes at higher elevations in Miami-Dade County are increasing in value at a much faster rate than homes at lower elevations. The researchers call it climate gentrification, with homes vulnerable to flooding at risk risk of losing value.
But Mar-a-Lago's still safe with that seawall they have down there?
No, they are not.
Sorry to hear it.
But finally, some good news. Climate Progress reports that electric cars have become so cheap to drive that even the Trump administration can't ignore them. A report from Trump's own Department of Energy admits that it is much cheaper to drive an electric car any distance than it is to drive a comparable gasoline car. Nationally, consumers with electric cars save on fuel costs on average 60% over conventional gas-powered internal combustion engine cars.
The administration might not be ignoring it, but you can bet that Donald Trump and Scott Pruitt certainly are.
Indeed.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more.
What you say?
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more.
Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania. Done.
Taking care of business every day. Taking care of business every way. I've been taking care of business. It's alright. Taking care of business.
Ah, yes, done. However you can lie, cheat, steal, however you can rig an election, we're going to do, right? Well, today the U.S. Supreme Court evidently remanded the gerrymandering cases back, what they're calling a punt. This was an opportunity, I thought, to maybe get something done on the partisan gerrymandering, and there were two cases, one from Maryland, one from Wisconsin, on both opposite ends of the spectrum, one going after Democrats, one going after Republicans, of saying, hey, you know, these are unfair. We should be doing this better. And the Supreme Court chose, well, I guess just to punt this back. I don't know if it comes back or not, which is why we've asked Dan Vicuna to come talk with us. He's the National Redistricting Manager for Common Cause. Dan, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So is it accurate? This was just kind of a punt back to the lower court?
That's about right. So, you know, in these two cases, as you mentioned, one a Republican gerrymander out of Wisconsin and one Democratic gerrymander out of Maryland. The litigants sort of took slightly different approaches, and the Supreme Court had some slight problems with both of them. So, I'll sort of start with what didn't happen in these cases. The Supreme Court didn't say that partisan gerrymandering is okay, that the manipulation of our voting maps is acceptable, just a part of the game. But they also did not strike the maps down. They didn't set a standard for partisan gerrymandering, prohibit it for good. What they did was, in the Wisconsin case, they said, the way you litigated this, the approach you took, you are challenging this map on a statewide basis. You got to get different plaintiffs. You have to show sort of individualized harm, so you have to find some new plaintiffs. But so we're going to remand it back to the trial court. You can try again, get plaintiffs that are from every district, talk about very specific harm to those plaintiffs and how the lines were moved in those districts, and we'll take a look again. In the Maryland case, slightly different problem. They were very early in the process. They hadn't litigated the case yet. What the plaintiffs were trying to do was make sure that Maryland residents could vote in fair districts this year. So they were seeking a preliminary injunction to make that happen even before they went to trial. But the trial court said, no, we're not going to act right now. We want to hear this case. And the Supreme Court declined to reverse that decision. So they're sending it back, and those are going to be litigated. So that was disappointing for advocates for sure. But the positive news is that coming down the pike next is Common Cause's own case. This is our challenge to an extreme partisan gerrymander of North Carolina's congressional map, where legislators who drew those districts were very explicit. They said, we're drawing this map to make sure it's 10 Republicans, 3 Democrats. This is a partisan gerrymander. We want to make that clear. They screamed it from the rooftops. We challenged it in court. We won at the trial court. We do not have the problem of standing that the Wisconsin case had. and we do not have the problem about this being too early in the process that the Maryland case had, because we won a trial. So we're waiting for the Supreme Court to give us the green light, say they're going to hear this case, and we expect it to be heard in the fall, and this could be the vehicle for ending partisan gerrymandering, hopefully.
Is there any chance that it doesn't get heard?
Yeah, it's very unlikely. The way that redistricting cases are heard, they go straight from a 3-judge panel straight to the Supreme Court. And the rules are a little different in that the Supreme Court, really has a lot of incentive to hear this case, because if they just, decline to hear it, then the ruling stands. It sort of sets national precedent without the Supreme Court getting to weigh in. So they're very reluctant in these redistricting cases to just punt and accept what the trial court did. So, it's something so important as partisan gerrymandering, where the court has yet to set a standard. We're very confident they're going to hear it and hopefully do the right thing and end this practice.
Yeah, I mean, because I had some hope that, with the Wisconsin case at least, that, in some of the writings that I guess Anthony Kennedy has engaged in over the years, that maybe he could be the rational one of the 5. And then there's talk that, a potential retirement. I don't know that that's going to happen, but I start to go, another Gorsuch-like character on the court. This could go the wrong way for certain.
Yeah, it's a scary prospect. I think I don't know that the odds of a Donald Trump appointee wanting to do something about partisan gerrymandering are very good. It's impossible to read the tea leaves about what a justice wants to do, with his or her career. But I have a hard time imagining that Anthony Kennedy wants to leave the court without seeing some resolution to this problem that's plagued our republic since the beginning, but's gotten incredibly worse, much more scientific, and just more of a threat to our democracy in the last 10 years, thanks to technology and use of big data to make it precise process. It's worse than it's ever been. And the notion that Justice Kennedy would sort of leave the court and punt on that question and leave it to a Trump appointee is a little hard for me to believe.
No, I hope you're right. But here's the thing. I look at this and I don't have a clear idea of where they would take this. Do you have an idea of what you would like to see come out of these cases? What their decision, what you would like to see in it?
Well, what we want to see is a clear recognition that partisan gerrymandering, the manipulation of our voting maps, violates several bedrock constitutional principles. This is the victory that we won in the trial court in our North Carolina case. That one, it violates the First Amendment. It's viewpoint discrimination in states where Republicans are in charge. They're punishing, they're discriminating against Democrats, and vice versa, where Democrats are in charge. That's an equal protection violation. It's a dilution of the votes of the citizens. You're making it harder to really hold your elected officials accountable, and that's a very intentional thing that they're doing. And there are also a couple of provisions that we won on that are unique to our case that weren't involved in either the Maryland or Wisconsin case, in which we're saying that states have a responsibility to sort of help run elections, make sure they run smoothly, but they cannot preordain the outcome. That's a huge overstep, in terms of the power that states have over congressional elections. So I think, in our ideal world, we see a sweeping victory in which the court recognizes that partisan gerrymandering is offensive to all of the constitutional provisions that we've litigated in our case.
Now, to me, ultimately, I would like to see this settled, on the state level. Like here in Pennsylvania, there's a push to do something legislatively, although I'm not thrilled with the Republicans that put forth. Ultimately, I would like we the people to have a say in how our districts are drawn.
Yeah, and you were seeing an issue that was once fairly sort of sleepy and wonkish. There was a time, even a few years ago, where polling showed that a large majority of Americans didn't know the terms gerrymandering, didn't know the term redistricting. But now, I think maybe since the 2016 election, you're seeing people pay much closer attention to very fundamental democratic institutions that maybe we sort of took for granted and thought would be there and run without us, and recognize. But now we're recognizing that no, in fact, we need to do something about it. And so you're seeing incredible citizen movements to protect those democratic institutions, to strengthen them. for the first time in many states. In Pennsylvania, like you mentioned, there's been really surprising movement. One of the most difficult things in American politics is to get politicians to even contemplate giving up their own power to draw districts, because what greater power is there to manipulate maps for yourself?
Right. Well, I think the Republicans here see that the next time the maps could be redrawn, the Democrats might be in control, because our system is set up based on the Supreme Court, who controls the Supreme Court, and the last election before last, moved the Supreme Court to a Democratic majority, which, again, I'm not thrilled with the idea of our court being that ideological or even considered that ideological, but that's how it is here. So the fear from a lot of Republicans that I talk to is that they're going to be gerrymandered out of existence. And I got to be honest, I'm not thrilled with that kind of pendulum swing.
Well, I mean, I think that if that fear leads to a less partisan process, if politicians start to recognize that there is uncertainty about where things are going to go in the next election, and they say, you know what, our best bet for protecting ourselves is, not to keep the status quo and cross our fingers and hope that we get to control the process and manipulate it, but let's make it a fair process. So if we're in charge, it'll be fair to the other side. If the other side is in charge, it'll be more fair to us. So if a little fear and a little shame gets them to do the right thing, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let me ask you about the cases today again, because is there a chance that they don't come back to the court? Is there a chance that, like you said, they're going to have to go back to Wisconsin and relitigate that and find all new plaintiffs? And same thing with Maryland. Is there a chance that these have seen the light of day and they don't come back?
I think that they are likely to come back, again, because of that same process that makes it very likely our case is going to be heard soon out of North Carolina. I think Campaign Legal Center, who litigated the Gill case out of Wisconsin, is committed to seeing this through and getting Wisconsin residents fair districts. Same goes for Michael Kimberly and Mayor Brown, that's a law firm that's running the Maryland case pro bono. They are committed to seeing justice for their clients and for the residents of that state. So they'll go back. They'll go to trial. I think they'll heed the court's instructions as to how they need to adjust the litigation and bring it back up most likely. But we'll see what the world looks like by the time they get back to the court.
Right.
Based on what the court does in the North Carolina case.
Because that's what I was going to ask you. If your case in the fall, let's say it is the fall that's heard, and we get that maybe next June, who knows? Could it make their cases moot?
I think there is. You're still going to have to litigate each of these state by state. So our case in North Carolina may do in a perfect scenario is overturn the North Carolina maps, require them to be redrawn, and then it'll set a new standard for what partisan gerrymandering is, how we recognize it, and then trial courts across the country will then be able to use that, but you're still going to have to bring cases to challenge existing maps, where that's appropriate, where there's been manipulation. So we'll still have to be duking this out, on a sort of state by state basis, both of the grassroots in terms of legislation and ballot initiatives, but also on litigation.
Does this seem kind of backwards? I mean, I'm waiting for this Janus case to come down, and once it's decided, it's the law of the land. I don't understand why if North Carolina's gerrymandering is not constitutional, how it could be something you'd have to fight in South Carolina or in Virginia or anywhere else.
Well, the judiciary works slowly, but I think what we're hoping is that you don't have to litigate every state. We're hoping that this will set some guidelines, set some rules that will scare legislators. Even in states where in most of the country legislators control the process. There are a handful of states, California, Arizona, Washington, where they have independent citizens commissions that do the drawing, and it's a much fairer, more transparent process. But in most of the country, legislators do it. And, we're hoping that if the Supreme Court sets some guidelines and says, look, if you draw districts in a certain way, you're going to violate the Constitution. If you go to court, you're going to lose. So why don't you just do it right at the front end? I think that if the court sends a strong signal to the states on this, then maybe there will be required, less litigation down the road.
Or that's the hope. Dan, I appreciate the time, the information, keeping us up to date on what's going on, and giving me a little hope that come the fall, maybe there's a way forward.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Look forward to talking to you again then as this continues. Thanks so much, Dan. Dan Vicuna, National Redistricting Manager for Common Cause. You want to check out their website, commoncause.org/redistricting. Lots of information there, lots of stuff for you to take a look at. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Together, we can make America better. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1918. That was the day that the St. Paul Federation of Women Teachers, Local 28, received their charter from the American Federation of Teachers. That next February, the Minnesota Women's Union was joined by the St. Paul Federation of Men Teachers, Local 42. Organizing separate locals by gender was common at the time. It was not until 1957 that the teachers united together into one local. One of the founding members of the Women's Local was Mary McGuff. Mary had been a teacher since 1903. She was still an active participant in the union in 1946 when the Women Teachers Local 28 led the first organized teachers' strike in United States history. At the time, the idea of a teacher's strike was practically unheard of. In fact, strikes by public sector workers were explicitly forbidden and illegal. Despite this, 90% of the teachers voted to walk out on strike. The core issues of the strike were improving education, including a demand for smaller class sizes and improving the crumbling infrastructure of the city's public school system. The men's local joined the women on the picket line, but it was the women who organized the action. Mary McGuff was nearly 60 years old at the time. During the 6-week strike, Mary took to the radio. Her voice shared the story of the strike with the public. One striker remembered that Mary was able to cut politicians to threads, but did it in a very ladylike fashion. Finally, the strike ended in victory for the teachers. In 1969, the union established the Mary McGuff Award, which honors teachers for the advancement of education in the St. Paul schools. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm going to this battle, take my union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. You fascists.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So John sent me an email during the break saying that, you got spot on with the trade deficit stuff. We got to fight the trade deficit. And he went into this lengthy email about our budget deficits, our budget debt, all of our national debt and all of that stuff. And then finished up with the question that I've asked for a couple of years now. Where are the T-twits? Where are all the Tea Party folks? Where are the fiscal conservatives? Where are those people who, when they grab up a quarter, the eagle screams? Where are they? Because we just gave a couple $1 trillion away to the wealthy in this country, creating even larger deficits. And what I love hearing is, the economy's doing well. We're going to have, I think they were saying that, the GDP growth is going to be over 4%. And you go, well, it better well be. It better be over 4% with the stimulus package that this administration just put into an already doing somewhat well economy. It better be. In fact, I would expect 5 or 6 with the amount of money that they claim that they're pumping into the economy. Because remember, tax cuts are stimulative, or they want us to believe it's helped to stimulate the economy. You do that when things are going wrong. And the thing that bothers me is, if you remember during the Obama years, all I kept hearing from conservatives was, how in debt as a country we're, how big these deficits were. So when John sends me this email, it says in 2018, this year, we're going to have an $804 billion budget deficit. $804 billion deficit. with an economy that is supposedly smoking hot. 3.8% unemployment. It's the best it's ever going to be. And we're still borrowing money? Really? I mean, stop and think about that for a minute. And maybe it was just, I had an old curmudgeon for an economics teacher back 100 years ago who was very clear about budgets and deficits. You deficit spend when you're doing poorly, and when you're doing really well, you pay back the deficit. You pay it back. It's kind of like the kitchen table stuff. If you lost, and this was the example he used. You got a credit card. When you lost your job, you went and you did some good spending. You went and got a resume made. You went and bought a new suit. You maybe got an aftershave so you don't stink when you go to the job. Whatever. Maybe you took a class on how to improve your skills. Those are all good debt spending. Because once you get a job, then you go, okay, I spent $1,000 on A, B, C, and D. Now I got this job. I'm going to pay it back so that in 10 years, if it happens again, I can do it again. What bad spending is, and this is what we've been doing for a very long time, is bad spending is going, hey, I got some time off. I'm going to Hawaii. We've been doing a bunch of that. We've been giving boatloads of money away to the very wealthy and these big corporations without any return on our investment. And you go, hello, shouldn't we be paying back some of this $804 billion deficit? And next year it only gets worse. Next year it goes up to $981 billion. 2020, it breaks $1 trillion. 2021, it's $1.1 trillion. 2022, $1.3 trillion more. 2023, another $1.3 trillion, until eventually all the way up to 2028, you're talking $1.5 trillion in budget deficits. Add all that together, by 2028, we're going to be almost $34 trillion in debt. Because during the good years, we didn't pay anything back. And we're told that these are the smart people? Now remember, and again, I come back to take you back to the Obama years. Because we've all seen the memes. Obama borrowed and spent more money than everybody. Without really remembering that we were in the greatest crisis in most of our lifetimes. We were on the brink of a Great Depression. And I would argue even what he did wasn't enough. The stimulus package that they put out was helpful. It worked, did what it was supposed to do. But it wasn't big enough. It wasn't bold enough. It wasn't targeted enough. We could have gotten a lot farther ahead quicker had it been chunky, had it been really aggressive. But hey, Obama was negotiating with the Republicans, who were concerned about what? Budget deficits and debt. And yet, have you heard one Republican, even one, say that they're concerned about this year an $804 billion budget deficit? And in 2 years, $1 trillion budget deficit that's going right onto our debt? I haven't, unless I missed it, unless I completely missed it. Because it's not there. And I keep going back to my tea friends. When do you start waking up to this? Because in 2010, you were all over this. You were whining and complaining and screaming and hollering and get your hands off my Medicare and the whole nine yards. Maybe VH1 should do an episode of Where Are They Now? Because I haven't heard a peep. And that's the scary thing in this, because with this administration spending like drunken sailors, or I shouldn't even say spending, stealing at the rate that they are, all of us should be afraid. Because guess what? By 2028, that nearly $34 trillion, that comes out of our pocket. We don't go bankrupt. We don't get to write it off, even as Trump wants to. Scary stuff. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in. If you missed any of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go. Thanks so much. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like tides flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.